Coffee Monday is more than a podcast. It's a movement to reshape the way we approach Mondays and the week ahead. It's about embracing the reality that work doesn't have to dominate our lives. It's about finding that sweet spot where passion, purpose, and a cup of motivation connect. Filmed and recorded in California's Central Valley, join me, your host, Rae Pardini Matson, as I invite thriving professionals to share their stories of how they're crafting a life that's both vibrant and balanced. So, Jordan, I feel like I need all the tips. You said, was it 289 episodes you've done of a podcast?
I've done a lot of episodes. So that's like divided across all the different platforms that I've tried to build. So, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
So, want to take it a step back for those that don't already know you.
Okay.
Jordan Mattox, librarian, educator, podcast host, author, maybe one day.
Yeah, forthcoming book on the history of Fresno. That's in the works. Yep.
That's exciting. Tell us about how you got to Fresno. I guess let's start there and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I was born in Anaheim. My dad was in the military, and then we moved around a little bit in childhood. He went to grad school in Texas, and then he actually moved back to California and planted a church in Bakersfield. So I'm a pastor's kid, grew up in Bakersfield, and then went to school in San Francisco and grad school in Pasadena. Met my wife down there in grad school. She is a clinical psychologist, and so after we both finished there, I kind of, we moved around for her residency and training, and then 7 years ago, we basically got a notification that a family member was very ill and that we needed to move to relocate here to help and support, and so we made the admittedly tough decision to kind of pack our bags and leave Southern California and move here. And so, it was kind of something we'd always talked about, but it was not something that was necessarily part of a concrete plan until life happened.
Life happens.
Yeah.
So when was that? When did you move to Fresno? What year?
So I guess that was 2017.
Okay.
Yeah. And so 7 years now, something like that.
Had you visited before?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'd come for her family stuff.
Yeah.
And, Fresno's fun when you come during the holidays. The weather's nice. There's Christmas Tree Lane. It's the kind of it's the college trip home sales pitch.
Totally.
It works.
Totally.
It worked on me a little
funny.
bit, and then
but
then you come in the summer and you're like, oh yeah, that's what
that's why. Yeah. But Bakersfield, similar weather, I feel, right?
Yes, but part of the leaving Bakersfield for me was kind of a permanent move. I wasn't anticipating going back to a similar climate, but I will say Bakersfield and Fresno are very different places, both culturally, in terms of the topography, in terms of the the economy. It's a different place. So Fresno and Bakersfield are I view as, even though they're both in the Central Valley, very, very disparate communities.
Yeah, I could see that. So you come to Fresno, you're kind of getting acclimated, life living here versus just visiting here.
Right.
And did you have a job lined up when you moved? Were you looking when you came? Like, how did you start to navigate what your path, your career, your interests looked like here when you moved?
Yeah, so I work in public education, and so if you work in public education, you have a job anywhere and everywhere. And so in Southern California, I was working primarily in private schools, which have their benefits and their headaches. Private schools in Southern California are an adventure. And so when I moved here, I decided to make the move to public school. So I actually worked as a middle school teacher in Chowchilla for my first 4 years living here, which was kind of nice because I could get to see a variety of places in the valley and really try to learn about it expansively and not just the particular pocket that I lived in Fresno at that time. I was living kind of in the Champlain and Perrin area of Fresno, and so that was a very distinct pocket, and I got to see a very different place in Chowchilla, to say the least.
Yeah, I bet. And then how do you go from obviously education and navigating your professional career to deciding, hey, I think I'm going to start a podcast? Like, how did that even come about?
I want to say with full transparency, I started the podcast before COVID. I know a lot of people are, there was this huge boom of like, I'm at home, I'm bored, I want something to do. And so the first program that I launched was called the History of California podcast. And that was for me kind of a way to have intellectual conversations and engage about books and tell the story of the history of the state. And basically, I chose to do it because I looked around the market and there wasn't really anything in the space. And I really love storytelling and I really love talking to people and having engaging conversations. And so it seemed like the right fit for me. And so I did that for about a year. And then some of my friends were kind of observing what I was doing. And they said, we really need something kind of like that, but different for Fresno. And so we hatched a plan to have three of us host a podcast where we interviewed interesting people in Fresno. And so we did, I think, 3 episodes before the shutdown happened. And eventually the 2 other hosts had, for life reasons, but also career reasons, had to stop hosting with me. And so it was just kind of dropped on my lap by myself. And I had to make the choice. Do I want to keep doing this or do I want to, just kind of let it go like a lot of other people were with their kind of COVID podcast programs. And so what I decided is I kind of refashioned it to fit my personality, which is like somewhat funny, very nerdy podcasts where we talk about all sorts of wildly kind of different topics. And I really enjoyed doing it. And I had a day job, so I could, the ROI didn't have to be clear to me. And so I just said, I want to keep doing this. And it really is an amazing networking tool. It's an amazing learning tool. Like, I feel like when I have conversations with people, I do learn the most because I get feedback on my thoughts in real time. And so, I found a lot of benefits for it. And so I've continued to do it. I think we're on episode 141 right now. And then most recently I started Fresnolandia with Donnie Bergstrom at Fresnoland. And that was, again, like for me, I'm an opportunity person. And so I look at a market and I say, where is there a gap? And it seemed like we had lots of local journalism written, but not a lot of like audio content. For me and for a lot of like working parents and people that are busy, they consume a lot of their news in audio format. And so I thought this is a space where we need more content in Fresno. And I really liked what Fresnoland was doing and I really liked what Donnie was doing. And so I decided to kind of align those things in building a podcast.
Amazing.
It was really just looking at the market and finding need. And finding space. Is really what it was.
Love it. And I appreciate your dedication, your consistency. Because I feel like talking through that, okay, so we just touched on your 3 different podcasts and when they kind of all started. History of California, Fresno's Best, and Fresnolandia. What's the frequency of these? Because I do feel like, to your point, everybody and their mom started a podcast during COVID. And which is great. We've talked about this before offline.
It was a great hobby. It was a great hobby for a lot of people and kept people busy. And, because it was, a lot of us had experienced depression and like anxiety symptoms during COVID. And so to have something that's like concrete, like a goal, I think was great for people. It served its purpose.
Exactly. Have some more social connection with people. I've interviewed a few different guests too that started to really kind of blow up on social media during COVID, especially TikTok. And just because of consistency and engagement and all of that, their numbers just skyrocketed. So how do you maintain your consistency with these? And how frequently do each of these podcasts publish or drop? Whatever.
Consistency is tricky. And, so Fresnolandia, I'll start in reverse order.
Okay.
Fresnolandia is good because it has a weekly deadline. It's a weekly show. We have to air an episode every week. It's the commitment we made. It's important for the organization to have consistency with that. And so that functions as kind of like an external like guardrail deadline for me. And so that's fantastic. So that's a weekly show. Fresno's Best it really depends on guests. And so sometimes I'll have a queue out the door and I can post an episode a week if I wanted to. And then other months it'll be quiet, typically around the holidays where I struggle to find time in people's schedules. And so my goal with that is 2 to 3 times a month. But
that's great.
Which is good. I will say at one point, when I was just was having a lot of success securing guests, I was doing almost once or twice a week. But that got to the point where I just felt overloaded, and you know, I'd like close my eyes and there'd be a different guest in front of me, and I'd be like, "Where did you come from?" And so, like, for my own sanity, I kind of pulled back, and I'm trying to set boundaries for myself. And then History of California is similar. It's also guest dependent. I mean, a lot of those guests, actually most of them, if not all of them, don't not live in Fresno, and I record remotely with people around the world that are experts on Western history, and so that can be guest dependent too. But I also do narrative episodes, and that just takes how long I write them, essentially.
Yeah, wow. I guess that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the prep work, people don't understand that.
Yeah, it is really hard to prep. And especially, I mean, we were just talking about this before we started recording. I have an interview this afternoon with someone that's working on a plasma technology to attack forever chemicals, which is probably in all of our drinks right now, but we won't go into that. And I'm not an expert on decontaminating water and plasma technology. And so, the research involved can be time consuming and cumbersome. I will say ChatGPT is really helpful these days. Not that I rely on it, but it's a helpful resource. So there's some shortcuts, but the bottom line is I love what I get to do. So the work doesn't always feel like work. And so if you find yourself in a space where you're trying to make something and you're taxed in the actual workflow process, that maybe is your body telling you something, and that you should listen. And, sometimes it can mean I want to do this differently. Sometimes it can mean I want better boundaries. And sometimes it means you just stop doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm always willing to quit things. I think a lot of people, we've been given this virtue of like, push through, almost ignore what your body's telling you.
Right.
And I think that's why we have a lot of issues in our society of
I agree.
And, too busy, and our calendars are too full. It's like, just listen to yourself,
Well, you're so in tune, though. I feel like not everybody is in tune with their body or in tune with those boundaries, you know, or even just aware to think like, yeah, you're right. Maybe this is my body telling me something, or it's not how I want to be spending my time.
Yeah, I think it's the fusion of I'm naturally a neurotic, introspective person, and then I've also been in therapy for a very long time. So I wouldn't recommend neuroses for people, but it definitely helps you be more in touch with your feelings.
Have you ever had your wife on the podcast?
No, and I will never.
You will never?
Yeah, I mean, it's just...
I don't know. It just made me think of that. With her background, I'm like, that could be real interesting.
With given her work, she needs to write a book, and she needs to do a number of things. But yeah, I think that would be, no pun intended, a little too close to home to have her come on the show.
That's fair.
She would see through all my BS.
Yeah.
What it is.
That's funny. So you say, we were talking about it before we got started. I'm curious, like, where you record, what your process is. For all three of your podcasts, you do audio.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you record and edit all yourself?
Yes.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
And prep for every interview. Again, I just can't stress enough. I don't think people realize how much work it actually is to put this all together.
I know. And you know how they talk about it's the YouTube BS economy, where it's like
What
YouTube.
is that?
So it's where like YouTubers are explaining how to YouTube, and like giving you like advice and how to build and curate and create a brand. And I think what they don't say, or at least what a lot of them don't say, is it just is a lot of work. It's just a lot of like, I want to say mind numbing, but like, it's detailed, repetitive work for hours on end. And so some people have the stamina and some people don't, and I think it really comes back down to passion and love.
I agree with that. Jake also agrees with that. Because I think too, at least for me, I feel like I put a lot of pressure on myself to stay consistent, right? And Jake and I have even talked about that too. It's like consistency is one of the biggest keys to making a podcast that is successful.
Yeah, if there's gaps in your pulse, you're probably having an arrhythmia and you may be dying. So 100%.
No pressure.
Consistency.
Right. But it's finding the talent. It's doing the pre-interviews. It's doing the research prior to the interviews. It's working with the team to produce the episodes. And I don't know.
Let me say this one caveat. I think you do get better over time. Like, it's not
Yeah.
like something where, I think there is a positive linear regression where you have upward skill building over time that increases your efficiency. I'm at the point now where I can prep for an interview in less than an hour and a half. Just because it's so rote for me I'm just so repetitive that I've gotten to the point where it's almost like, it's clockwork. It doesn't require a lot of like front brain, prefrontal cortex. It's made its way to the lizard part back here. And so now I can just kind of push.
Yeah.
And that's, for a lot of people, I think, too, and there's a great book called The War of Art, where it's all about ship. People just need to ship their products. Just ship them, whether it's imperfect or not. Because if you watch, I don't know, you watch the Joe Rogan podcast, you watch a lot of these like big shows, big name shows, like Joe Rogan's been using the same music forever. It's just a couple cameras set up. There's not a lot of editing in terms of verbal fillers. People, if you're valued, people look past imperfections. And so,
That is true.
so I just choose to ship. And sometimes I ship shit. And that sucks. But like, it's part of the game. Like, every Picasso isn't perfect.
Yeah, true.
And not that I'm Picasso, but like.
Okay, so how many episodes to date? Was it 289? Did I get that right?
So it's probably more than that because I've killed a number of podcasts
That's
as
a
well.
lot. Wait, why?
Because they didn't make me feel good.
Oh.
I thought they sounded good, and then I did, and I was like, this sucks. I don't want to do it anymore.
Sucks. Wow.
Yeah.
Like,
And I can do that because I'm not doing this for money, right? Like my ROI is different. My ROI is like internal satisfaction rather than like having, trying to meet a quarterly goal, if you will. And so
that's very admirable, though. I'm going to just stop you there because I do feel like, for the most part, people do things to make money. Let's call it what it is. We live in a world where that's highly valued.
Right.
So I commend you for not having that as like the number one goal for starting it, like just based out of interest and desire, not money.
Yeah.
So with that, you get to choose your guests.
Exactly.
You get to ask them whatever you want. You get to kind of pave your way, right?
And we've talked about this before. Like I get to have an element of integrity. Sometimes that gets lost when you're doing things and you're strapped for cash and you need to do an interview with a particular person because they slid you a check, And so like I've had those opportunities and I've said no every time because as soon as you start taking money, you lose control.
Yeah.
And for me, like control is not the goal, but control allows me to have the freedom to choose the content to put out there that I'm proud of. And not everyone, that's what that's called in layman's terms is privilege,
Right,
because I have an income that allows me to do this as like, I don't know if I call it a hobby at this point, a very low paid side job. But I like my freedom so much that it would take a lot of money for me to forego that.
Right. That's fair. And I think that's a good lesson too, because just financial compensation versus lifestyle. I have a small business. I know that what I'm paying my team is, I would say, comparable to some others, but can't compare in other ways that a large firm could, for example.
Sure.
But where I do feel like I feed my team is with flexibility. And with being able to not have a ton of stress for the most part, like to me, and I guess I've learned that over the years, and obviously you have a similar perspective of, I'd rather have that flexibility and essentially get paid less than be stressed or feel, less inclined to do things that I want to do by getting paid more. Like to me, that's like not,
get off the hamster wheel and just lay in the wood chips, just enjoy the chips, right? Like I talk about this with people all the time.
Just
and
enjoy the chips.
I find that there are so many side benefits from doing something like this as well. You quickly become an expert in a lot of things really fast. And then suddenly you're a resource for people that aren't. And so I think people are too quick to worry about getting paid. And if you're worried about getting paid, just work a regular job and do this as a hobby until it can support you. But if you're jumping in headlong and you want to get paid immediately, your content's going to suffer.
Yeah.
It's going to suffer. And
That's true.
And maybe that sucks from an economic perspective. Maybe we need to fix it as a society, but none of us are in control of that. And so, yeah.
I think to your point, what'd you say? Just ship, right?
Yes.
And then people build a relationship with you. Mm-hmm. No pun intended. They build a relationship with you.
Yeah. They can trust you.
Exactly. So if you're leading without the trust, and you're leading with paid content or paid guests or paid partners, whatever that looks like for you, they're going to be like, who is this sellout, and is this even genuine, and what is happening here?
Yeah, you become Temu. And like Temu's great if you want to buy small plastic products from China.
I still have yet to buy anything from Temu. I'm actually
I have a friend
scared.
that's constantly sending me like pyramid scheme things. It's like, I get an extra 20% off if you buy this stupid plastic doll. And I'm like, what am I going to do with that?
But why? Yes.
Exactly.
But why?
Yes. And I think there are ways for you to kind of gradually include, things at cost, charging for things, kind of like a freemium model. And so I think there's ways to do it. I think you just have to really be careful. Because if you lose trust, no one's going to pay you for anything anyway.
It's true. So for somebody that wants to start their own podcast, what advice would you give them?
You don't need to be an expert in what you're doing.
Okay.
You just have to be a good learner. I think you need to pick a genre a little bit. I think there's a couple genres out there. Some have a lot of back-end work and some have a lot of front-end work. But I think you should look at it as, and I'm not just saying this because I work in education, like going to school, right? Like you're learning either how to have conversations with people. You're learning how to tell stories. You're learning how to look at current events and explain them in ways. And so I think if you have a passion for something, I think that's sufficient in order to start. And then, this is something that you and I talked about, and I think is really important, is, and in some ways it kind of sucks here in Fresno, there's a zero-sum mentality, a scarcity mindset, where, every show is in competition with each other, as opposed to looking at our shows like a beautiful library of thought across a city. And I was telling some people that live in other places with bigger markets about this, and they just said, really? Like
Fresno? Like, who do you think
like,
you are,
on,
sort
guys.
of thing?
So like, for me, it's working together, and it's having a passion for something that you love, and that can really drive you. And so I think more Fresno podcasters need to collaborate with each other. And so for me, every time I see a new one, I always want to invite them on, because I think I would rather have someone find a show through me that they like better than me and go to that show rather than look at them as an adversary. 'Cause I don't view, for me, I try to keep all of my relationships horizontal.
Yeah.
I don't want vertical.
Especially
in the creative space. We're all trying to share our stories.
Jordan, if everybody felt the way you did, our life and our world would be a much happier, better place.
I mean, you haven't gone deep into my mind yet.
Well, you know what I mean in relation to this topic.
Yes, of course.
So you make a good point. From the other Fresno podcasts that we probably both know of, I think we all bring something different to the table.
Yeah. Each voice is unique.
Yes.
And each voice is important.
Yes.
And every style is going to have its fans and its detractors. And when I started out, I'll fully admit, like when I would get a negative comment that, clearly was off base, I would, I would take it personally.
Yeah.
And it hurt me because, especially when you're not doing something for financial reasons and you're doing it for the love of it, you just want people to see that in your work. But then I recognized, well, maybe they're just expressing that they don't prefer my program and that they need something else. And wouldn't it be great to have like a whole library of selections or options for people to choose from so they could find their right fit?
Right.
Like, like in terms of Fresno's Best, like I try to keep politics out of it for the most part. And I'm a pretty, I would say, politically moderate person.
Yeah.
But some people just want some hard right, hard left content. Go find it,
Yeah.
I mean, both of those exist in Fresno, so I think there's places for that.
That's true.
So if I don't fit your needs, find someone else that does.
Right. Or listen to one for this reason, listen to another for this reason. I think ultimately all of our goal is to create more exposure, positive exposure for Fresno, for the Central Valley, to highlight cool people doing cool things. in a simple way,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, with Fresno's Best specifically, is
Yeah.
just broadcast that Fresno is a beautiful place like every other place in the world, and that there are great people here doing great things. And when I moved from Southern California, and my friends had kind of an ad hoc wake for me because they thought I was going, like I was crossing the River Styx. Like I think they thought the Grapevine was the River Styx, and I was going to go off to hell or wherever it was. And I, I was like, I think I need to make something that demonstrates to them not only their snobbery, but also the beauty of where I'm going to.
Right.
Because I really do think at my core, Fresno is unique, but it's also just another place. And that your love for a place comes from inside, not the topography, the landscape, the people, the economy, any of that. Like, if you love a place, I think that makes the place great.
I
So
agree.
it's a relationship, I think.
I agree. And I think that I'm a guilty person who has left and raised here, left and come back sort of
Boomerang.
thing. Yes. The typical boomeranger. But I'll admit, I never thought I'd be back. Ever.
Yeah.
And when I first came back, I never thought I would stay.
Yeah.
And now that I have, to your point, the love starts within, essentially. My mindset shifted. My priorities in my life shifted. What I wanted for myself, for my husband, for our family shifted. And I have just grown to love this place and couldn't imagine us anywhere else. And now I'm trying to recruit my friends from LA to come here.
Now that's more complicated.
Now that
I mean,
is a task.
It is a task, but maybe it's not the right fit for them.
Fair.
At least I think anyone could move here and learn to love it. I really do think so. Will they do that? No, probably not. But
I agree.
I do think that every place has its challenges and its opportunities.
So let me ask you this. I would have loved to have you as part of this discussion the other night. It was at the Fresno Business Council mixer that I was telling you about.
Yep.
And Janelle Taylor-Cumpy, the CEO of the organization, said some, opening remarks. Mayor Dyer was there to speak about kind of a state of the city update. And they asked everybody there to kind of speak at their tables about what they want for Fresno. Kept it very open-ended. And I was at a table, one of which was your guest on your podcast, Keisha Rajani, Curated Giftables. She was there. And it was her, and it was, I would say, 8 others and myself. And over half of us said what we want for Fresno is more attractions to be able to entertain and utilize the city without just going out to eat.
That is the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
And because there are a lot of job opportunities here to bring people here, but then what do they do here? To have obviously I strongly believe there's a lot to do here, but I'm just saying, it was an interesting perspective that over half of the people said more things to do.
Yeah.
What would you have thought or said, do you think?
That's a tough one for me to answer because there's a number of ways in which I might deconstruct that question.
Fair.
I don't think there's a Fresno. I think there are Fresnos. I think it is plural. For someone that's living.
But what do you mean by that?
For someone that's living west of the 99 in the southwest part of town, I don't think they're thinking about attractions. I think they're thinking about, safe environment.
Fair.
And
fair.
So I think there is a discussion about how do we lure in white collar, professionals to move here to boost our, educational capacity, if you will, if we're talking like economics. And then there's a discussion about the larger part of our city that is deeply impoverished and has a lot of challenges. And so I think...
Right, loaded question.
Yeah, so I think in some ways it's which Fresno and why. And so for me, I agree. I think we do need attractions. I think, I'm a board member at the Fresno Philharmonic. That's something that I'm really passionate about. And that's something that I want to be one of our key, signature attractions for the city. But we do need more. It would have been nice if we got Six Flags. It would have been nice if we had some of these other things. It would have been great.
Yeah.
But I do think that's not the biggest issue. I think the biggest issue is we've got a very deeply segregated city with a lot of different goals, a lot of different perspectives, and we don't listen to each other very well.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
Yeah. But I think that people at your table are completely right. Like, let's
Yeah.
get some fun stuff.
Yeah,
here.
this was
That'd be
very,
great.
like,
That'd be
high-
fantastic.
yeah.
Like more consistent
So-
content at Warner's. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's go. Come on.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I think it comes in waves, or maybe that's just my perspective. You know, there's moments, there's waves of that, there's
Sure.
glimpses of that. So tell me more, for those that aren't as familiar, about the inception of Fresnolandia and its connection to Fresnoland, and just how that all started.
Yeah, so I've been a Donnie stan. For those who are not familiar with the lingo, like a super fan. I've been a Donnie stan for a long time. Danielle Bergstrom, for those who don't know, started Fresnoland. She has an urban planning background, worked for the city of Fresno, and then wanted something that was really kind of policy oriented. 'Cause I think a lot of us, like, we use the city, but we don't really understand how the city works, if you
Fair.
will. And there's lots of things going on at city council meetings, county supervisors meetings that like are in some ways above our head, but not that complex if you actually break them down. And so I've been wanting to work with her for a long time, and she hatched a plan for a podcast right around the time that I said, I'd love to do this with you and partner up with you on this project. And so it was
Great.
just kind of a serendipitous alignment. And so the concept of the show is explaining from a policy perspective why the city is what the city is. Like how our zoning affects the way the city develops, how, decisions at the county supervisors meetings, at the city council meetings change the way people can live in this city. And so for me, I wanted something in audio format that was a condensed version of some of the deep policy writing they do at Fresnoland, because we know that not everyone that reads articles listens to podcasts and vice
Right.
versa, that there's parallel tracks. And then some people are just audio heavy and some people are reading. Some people, the rare person does both. But typically, we see people kind of self-segregating into different spaces. And so I felt like it was the right fit to have something like that. And
Yeah.
that's what I've gotten from, in terms of feedback from people, is that like, oh, this is perfect. Our episodes are typically less than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Perfect for your drive to work, and then, they release Tuesday mornings at 6 a.m. So people are just on their way to work on Tuesday mornings and they get, a digest of what's going on in Fresno in terms of politics.
I think you guys do a great job.
Thank you.
Really, truly concise, informational, consistent.
It's mostly Donnie. I'm very much like, I'm operating in a host capacity. I mean, I
Yeah.
share my thoughts on things
Yeah.
often enough, but really Donnie is the invaluable resource for Fresno because she has both the background knowledge of urban planning and understanding how cities operate and can also articulate that clearly, because
Right.
that's one of the big challenges is explaining municipal politics and urban planning and policy in ways that people can consume and understand and take with them and apply to their lives, in terms of how they behave. That is super hard, and she's very skilled at it. So
Yeah, it is. She is. So, and you're on a deadline every week.
yeah, it's
So I'm curious, and you don't have to tell me every detail, but I'm curious, and I think it's interesting for just people to understand that, like, yeah, we have a schedule every week. This happens. Like, do you record on Fridays? Do you record on Mondays?
late Friday afternoons,
Right?
Yep.
And that's like your day.
Yep. Yeah, and
It's like a download for the week sort of thing.
I think she's obviously shepherding a lot of the content, so it's all locked in for her, and I just try to read everything I can to keep up.
I was wondering, how do you stay abreast of all of the things? It's a lot of information to stay on top of. You're just constantly
I'm
reading.
like a little bit hyperlexic. I can read a lot very quickly,
Wow.
and that's one of I don't have very many superpowers, but that is definitely
That
the
is a
one.
great
And so I can
superpower.
consume content and information very quickly and digest.
Wow.
And that's just reps, right? Every superpower I think is just reps, just repetitions of going through.
That's
and
impressive.
because I love it too. So it's a combination of reps. I love it, and I have to do it. So
Yeah.
it gets done.
it's
It
like,
gets
yeah.
done in some way, right?
Yeah. So with all of the reading you're doing and the consuming of information, what do you consume like for funsies, like to unwind? Like, what sort of, do you listen to certain podcasts? Do you read certain types of books or publications? What do you do to like?
Well, you can actually, so I have a Substack page, which is basically like,
Yeah.
it's like, it's what blogs have become now, which
Right.
is just email newsletters. And so once a month I do like what I read and what I watched the last month.
Yeah.
And it's just like basically
Love
a
that.
diary of my content consumption. And so I do read a lot of fiction. I do read a lot of books every month. Some of them are related to podcasts, but a lot of them aren't. And yeah, I'm like a New York Times book review guy. Like I'm just New York review of books, London review of books. I'm just cycling through constantly, just like
Wow.
almost erratically reading. Like, yeah, it's almost a compulsion at this
Have you
point.
always been that way?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Well, I think it's just what I love.
Yeah.
And
That's so great.
And a lot of the books are. My wife's in a book club, and we often talk about this where she'll see me reading a book and she'll be like, "But you're not at work. That does not look fun." And I'm like, it's like whenever you get into a hobby and you really dig in, eventually your hobby looks boring to outsiders. Like that's just the inevitable outcome.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's like because you brush past the surface stuff, and then you're like, what else is there? And you just keep digging and digging and digging.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you're reading a biography of a Baroque conductor, Baroque composer from the 17th century. That has no relationship to your life. It's 800 pages. You're sitting there. You feel absurd. It's a Friday night, and your wife's looking at you like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm having fun. What do you think I'm doing? I'm having so much fun." And so, I really do think when you really dig into a hobby, that's the eventual outcome.
That's so true, though. So how quickly do you finish a book? Give me like a, I don't know, 400 or 500 page book.
3 or 4 days, probably.
Wow.
So
That is so impressive.
Well,
And I know
it's
you
just-
say you enjoy it and you love it. That's amazing. That's just really cool.
it supplements TV. I will say during football season,
Yeah.
that's my guilty 49ers.
Okay,
and football.
49ers.
Yeah, that's like
All
my
right.
guilty pleasure. So
Yeah.
that my reading productivity drops considerably during that time of year.
Love it.
But yeah, there'll be a football game on. I'm just leafing through books
Yeah.
really quickly on a Sunday.
Like you'd rather read than watch a show.
Yeah, so last weekend I read a couple books, and it was
Yeah.
I considered that a great weekend. That's
I love
enjoyable.
that. I am trying to teach my kids that. So we could have the TVs on pretty much all day if we wanted to, but we're trying to be conscious of not, right? And the other day, my oldest is just now starting to read from start to finish a book and without help, sounding out words, that sort of thing. And she asked if she could watch a show. And I'm like, honey, you have entertainment right here in this book. There are stories right here in these books. Take one. And she was just mesmerized by that. And it's just cool. It's just fun to see that. And we're just getting
started, at least with our kids, of starting to read and exploring. She read her first chapter book the other night.
That's amazing.
Big deal.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
With flannel in mind and dreams of all things pumpkin and fall, Dutch Bros is cozying up with their new fall drinks. Fall's bestie, the caramel pumpkin brulee, returns and helps give us a warm welcome to their 3 new seasonal flavors: the caramel pumpkin brulee breve, the cookie butter latte, and the caramel apple rebel. All of these delicious fall treats are available now through October 31st. So don't miss your opportunity to manifest fall and cooler weather in the valley with these seasonal drinks at Dutch Bros. The San Joaquin Flower Collective's Wednesday pop-ups are back. Join them every Wednesday from 9 to 11 a.m. at Sanctuary Coffee to enjoy a fresh cup of coffee, local flowers, and a delightful community experience. The beautiful floral centerpiece you see on our shows is styled by the incredibly talented Darcy Hovsepian of DH Floral, featuring flowers that are grown and sourced from local flower farmers in our Central Valley. This is made possible thanks to the San Joaquin Flower Collective, the first and only source for 100% locally grown flowers in the valley. Their mission: to reduce the need for imported flowers by providing an easy online ordering experience and fostering collaboration amongst flower growers and enthusiasts. Plus, their weekly flower pop-ups are the perfect place to pick up some stunning farm-grown blooms every Wednesday from 9 to 11. Whether you're a wholesaler, retailer, or simply a flower lover, follow along on Instagram at SJ Flower Collective for the latest updates and info on their fresh bloom pop-ups.
You know, it is hard, like, especially as a lot of parents just kind of slide the child care device across the table, you know, and then, so you're basically giving your kids cocaine.
Yeah.
And then later on, you're like, well, actually, do you want to crochet? You're like, no, I want the cocaine again. And so it's like, well, of course they can't pay attention because they're all coked up.
Yes.
Crocheting is not fun until you've done it much, right?
Yeah.
And so you
Teaching them.
Yeah, like it is work. It is work to become a good reader.
I've heard that a lot recently.
Yeah.
And parents who have kids that are avid readers say it's not like it happened overnight. It took a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of repetition.
Mm-hmm.
So you've always loved reading. You remember even as a kid, you did?
Yeah, my dad was a big reader, and so I've had distinct memories of waking. I was always an early riser. I think it was my dad was in, so
Yeah.
kind of like did up early thing, and so I'm the oldest, and so I would want to do what my dad does, and so
Yeah.
I'd get up early, and he'd be on the couch, get this big theology books, and I'd plop down with my Animal Atlas, and before you know it, the Animal Atlas transitioned to Harry Potter, and before that, and after that, it transitioned to Charles Dickens, and then before you know it, I'm reading a weird history of the Aztecs with my wife during Monday Night Football, and that's just what it is, you know. And it's just it's a very linear path.
There have been so many films and so many shows based on books, though. So I'm sure, but every time, unless you can think of one, every single time people say the book's better.
Yeah, well, I mean, you get the interior life, right?
Right.
And that's what we connect to. That's what we connect to.
Yes.
It's like people's interior, and so
Yes.
movies can't really do that, and they can, but in a very limited capacity. And you know, if you have narration the entire movie, it's going to be
It's
exhausting.
going to be,
I mean, there's reason you go to sleep during Ken Burns documentaries because it's just, you know, he's just him talking. That was good. Like, flippy that.
oh my God. Which, speaking of it, we're on the phone the other day doing the pre-interview yesterday. And you're telling me you're in a Willy Wonka costume.
I
And you actually were.
I think peacocking is underrated. I think dressing up is underrated. You know, sometimes you can be in a work environment, even in public education, where people are just like, and I just remind them they're all going to die, and like we should have fun. And so I'll just, you know, I think one of my vice principals was like walking by me, and I was in the Willy Wonka costume, like typing an email, and like he said hello, you know, you could tell he was Rousseau's Warner Stingray, and like just kind of walked by him, hello, and he like did a double take and was like, Wonka? Yeah. And like that little moment for me is enough. That justifies the whole costume. All, you know, my wife trying to fix the wig in the morning, like it justified the whole thing to me.
And when did you decide you were going to do this? That morning? The day before?
No, I occasionally thought, I comb through thrift stores regularly to find weird costumes. Yeah. So I have a costume. We have like bins in our garage. I have a costume bin.
So do I.
Costumes are so important. What are your costumes?
So you have all kinds of.
What do you have? You picked the Halloween outfit?
Oh yeah, most big. Probably
What's
6 different.
It's going to be the day of? Is this going to be a surprise, or you can?
So the day of, no, it's fine.
Was it coordinated?
My family and I dress as a family every year since we've had our first daughter. Now we have 3 kids, and we typically have done Disney movies because we're cheesy like that. And my husband's family, my in-laws, are big Disney people.
Okay.
By marriage, I am now too. So this year we're doing Incredibles.
That's fantastic.
It's fine.
Yes.
Last year we did Alice in Wonderland. Year before we did Encanto. We were like Disney tourists with Mickey and Minnie.
That's so fun.
It's fun. I love dressing up. I have multiple costumes.
It is fun.
I think I have since high school, all through college, all the theme parties and that sort of thing. And now as adults, I was talking to friends about this. They're really, other than obviously Halloween,
Yeah.
who calls theme parties anymore? We need more theme parties.
That's not really a saying anymore.
At least I think so.
Yeah, I don't know if COVID put a damper.
You think?
I don't know. I mean, But I just sit there, you've gone back to such good TV to watch, so people just don't want to.
Just don't. I just love a good theme party. And actually, my husband doesn't like dressing up, or at least he didn't when we first started dating. So when we would do like costumes together as a couple, I had to be really thoughtful of like, okay, what can I do to make this as easy for him as possible? First year was Pat Sajak and Vanna White. He wore a suit.
I will say,
That's unique.
Pat Sajak, I hate that guy. But that's a whole different story. There's backstory to this. I hate that guy. Because he's gone, right? He's off Neil.
I love Neil. Why do you him? Don't ruin my celebrity moment.
You know.
Do you like know him?
Well, no, but I've done a lot of reading on Pat Sajak. Don't ask me why. And
Is he like a bad human?
I just think.
I could kind of see that actually.
Yeah, I know we don't need to go down the Pat Sajak rabbit trail, but I've been on this bandwagon for a long time and we try to get, like an anti Pat Sajak bandwagon and I just like, I love most people. It's something about him. Just when he smiles and gets the wrong letter, like I just think that there's something deeply dark in them. And so I'm willing to talk directly about it.
I actually can't wait to hear more about that. I love Wheel of Fortune. I love Wheel of Fortune. I love board games. I play Wordle every day. Into that. But okay.
This mornings?
No, not yet.
When do you do it?
At night.
Oh, okay. I do it in the morning.
Do you?
First thing.
See, I do it last thing.
Do you do connections too?
Sometimes.
Okay. Connections.
Yeah. See how I feel.
Yeah.
But let's see. We did that. We did Where's Waldo? Easy.
That's fine.
Striped t-shirt, beanie, glasses, done. So I try to get creative.
Do you have advice for me? Because my wife resists dressing up.
Okay.
And I struggle, persuade her how that.
I think baby steps. Exactly. Try to find things that are, or just
really
like,
cool.
Correct.
Start there.
A hat or a bag or like simple things that she could wear like the normal clothes with something else.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
Because literally it started, he was wearing a suit, then he was wearing a t-shirt. Then, even this year, we're doing Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh, that's fun.
He's wearing a black t-shirt. I'm just going to cut it up with a black blazer.
So in education, we call this scaffolding, where you you can't do the actual task itself. So we build in.
We're building. And then last year, he wore a full-on Mad Hatter.
So you have one.
I think over the last 8 years,
I need to get to work. Yeah, I absolutely need to get to work.
What'd you say? It takes putting in the work to get there? That is taking funny
reps. So you've done the reps.
Yes. So what are you going to be for Halloween?
This year I'm going to be the Lorax.
Oh my God.
So I've got the big yellow eyebrows and the big yellow mustache and the orange stamp.
Got it.
So, I'm going to stuff it full of pillows and just, because, when you work in high school, the objective is to throw them off as much as they can, get them out of their protective bubbles for a second and have the bottom. And so if I can look particularly absurd and just throw them off that way, I think I'd won. That's the way I look at it.
I love it so much. It's so great. So fun. So tell me, Jordan, I feel like what are you hoping for with expanding the kind of growth of your podcast presence? I feel like because each of your podcasts are so different. With the Fresno theme in mind.
Yeah.
Let me take it a step back. Coming to Fresno, not being from here, we've talked about this offline. I think it's important to share to kind of continue your storytelling and get our listeners and our viewers kind of more familiar with who you are and your passion for the area. I think it's easy to just move somewhere and just be fine, complacent, not do anything, kind of go about your day. I sense this you feel compelled to dive into where you are, right? Yeah. Talk to me more about that and your passion for the area and having all of your podcast projects centered around it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things I can say.
Yeah.
One, I think my love for Fresno is arbitrary.
Good.
If I met my wife in Southern California and she told me she was from Turlock,
right, and
said, I was a thing in the middle of the movie to Turlocks.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to get Turlock's best. I don't know if there'd be a Turtlelandia because that sounds criminal. But there would probably be a version of that.
Yeah.
I probably would have the same energy for Turlock that I have for Fresno. And that's just another way of me saying is every place is unique, but not unique at the same time. And let me explain. So like every place has the unique story. And because of that, you can fall in love with any place if you care about it.
Yeah, we touched on that.
Yeah, we touched on that. And so for my passion is driven by the fact that I'm here. And I think localism is the future. I really do. I mean, I think we've had some swings with kind of global trends being the thing, but I think increasingly, in part because some of the tools have been made accessible for people in local places. The power of the printing press or whatever has been put in everybody's pocket. I think that has enabled us to really create our own information about what we are. And I think people are starting to see when New York, LA, San Francisco, and maybe sometimes Chicago controls a lot of our information, it's not really from us or for us. And so I think that's what Donnie's doing at Fresnoland, which is like creating information for us, that we need. And so like I view it as we are taking control and telling our own stories because LA doesn't need to tell all of our stories. And so like for me, like I want to tell stories that make sense here, and I think Fresno is a beautiful place. So many other places.
Yeah.
And I think we all need to take ownership, and I
agree.
Take ownership of where we live and not apologize. We need to stop apologizing anymore. It's reflexive for all.
That's true.
It's worrisome. Like we don't need to do that anymore.
Well, I think to your point, you touched on it a little bit in passing earlier of just like, for lack of a better way of saying it, people are ignorant. They don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know anything about Fresno other than maybe what they've passed by on the freeway.
Yeah.
In passing.
And even on the freeway, like you get certain images like, oh my God, everyone's gotten injured in a tractor accident. Oh my God, they have casinos and they've got tri-tip sandwiches. This place is great.
It's funny because, I don't know if funny is the word, but in places like LA, it's good to be off the freeway. It's prime real estate to be off the freeway. At least where Fresno is now, and maybe it'll change, it's not necessarily prime real estate to be right off the freeway. So for retail specifically.
Yeah.
So that's really not the best representation of our city. It's off the freeway.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I get what you're saying about the ignorant. It's not really a pejorative statement.
Yeah.
It's just a statement of you don't know because you haven't been there.
Fair.
And, like 2 years ago, Aziz Ansari came here, did a shuttle owners. He was making all these jokes about like where he was. And like at one point he's like afraid because there was some commotion in the back. Like, I think we kind of like take in people's perception and it becomes part of our self-perception. And I think that sucks, but it's natural too. Like it's, we want to please others and want to be proud of what we have. But when forsake things, we can absorb that in ways that.
So how do we change that? We don't. Like you said, stop apologizing.
Yeah, well, just take into the parts of the city that are beautiful to you and like take ownership. Like it's not rocket science. It's just choosing to be positive about where you are. And not apologize. Things that are A, outside of your control, and B, at that, like
right.
There's a whole rabbit trail we could follow with that. But I think I am hopeful, I'm optimistic, I'm bullish on the future of this region. I think some of the divisive elements we need to work on those that I'm bullish on.
Well, if you don't mind sharing, you're very active in our community. You are engaged with a lot of our community organizations. Do you mind sharing some of those or at least things that you kind of have devoted your time to outside of your work?
Yeah, so, I have my podcast space, but I'm also on the board of the Fresno Film. I'm on the community advisory board about DBS. I've done a lot of work with library systems in town, both in volunteering and teaching capacities. And, for me, it's, I think the the vitality of the city is the strength of things, organizations, and institutions. There's a great book called Why Nations Fail. One of the things they look at, where it's not climate, it's not any of those things, it's strength of institutions that really determine the future of the country. And I think that's true to me as well, too. The strength of our city is based on the strength of our institutions. And some of our institutions, sadly, are run by people that are looking out for themselves. Some of our institutions are run by the most fearless, courageous leaders you'd ever meet. Need more of those and less of the former. And so I really view it that way. And so I want to put myself in a position where I don't have a vested interest and just want to think about, like, how do we strengthen this institution? So, to your point earlier from the business council meeting, if you're a well-to-do white collar worker and you see that there's a vibrant classical music organization in a town, like that's a check for you in terms of, are we a big thriving city? Like that's one of the check boxes. And so I think focusing on strengthening our institutions is where I want us headlight.
That's great. And do you find that you've made some of those connections through your podcast efforts?
Oh yeah.
That's great.
No, absolutely.
That's good.
That's how I joined with the Fresno Philharmonic on their board.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Musical director, and then I got to know Stephen Wilson over there. I think just getting out, and that's the other thing I tell people is, like, there's so much opportunity here. In Fresno. Like if you want to be a leader in organizations, move here. There's lots of space for you. Welcome.
And you know what? We were talking about this too, offline, of just like the fact that Fresno is a great place to start a business. I think.
Yes, absolutely.
We support local, we support each other. The cost of living, relatively speaking, is manageable compared to other larger cities surrounding our area. And we just have a lot of resources here, I think, that are untapped in some respects. And I've heard that a lot from other small business owners. Like, I could have never done this in other markets because they're either too saturated, they don't support local, there's no sense of community, the list goes on.
Yeah. Well, Fresno also needs to do their part. Stop going to the Cracker Barrel or your local restaurant. But that's a difference.
But that's a whole nother story. Yeah. So for Fresno's Best, what sort of guests are you hoping to continue to bring on the show?
It's interesting because, like, there's what I envision in my mind, what I'd like to have. There's who says yes, and you know this. For me, it's people that are not in the news as much. While politicians can drive clicks, we've talked offline about the buffering face. You ask a politician like a real question, and their face starts to spin as they think about the correct answer to say that won't get them in trouble.
Yes.
So it's like, it can be a little bit sleep-inducing. So I like people that just like to talk and are interesting and are doing interesting things. Those are the guests that I look for. I don't have a specific domain. I can talk to a farmer. I can talk to a philosopher.
Yeah.
You set me up with whoever.
Which you have.
Yes, I have done both of those.
Suppose, yeah. Well, that's cool. Well, I appreciate you spending the time with me today and kind of flipping the switch a little bit. You as a guest.
Yes, this was. Actually, I'm on the other side a lot, and I forget the challenges of this side. And
hopefully it wasn't too challenging.
Well, I think you're an incredible host. I think you do it very well. I say we have very different styles, and I felt very comfortable in your soft hands as you guided me through this. And so I think what you're doing is amazing, and I think you need to keep doing it.
Thanks, Jordan. You too. I love that we're supporting each other, and what is it? Community over competition, right?
Yes, we will hold hands and do kumbaya after, and then get right back to work.
Well, coffee cheers, rebel cheers. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for listening. Feel free to rate and review this episode here and connect with us on Instagram if you have any thoughts, questions, or any guest suggestions. Thanks.